welcome back to Becoming Brittany J. My name is Brittany J. Thanks for tuning in to the channel again. This channel is all about peace, growth, and guidance, and I pretty much am taking you on a journey of life as I learn peace, growth, and guidance within myself, so you will be able to use the same things that I learned and come back and share with you all, so you can possibly and potentially apply these to your life so you can start living your life peacefully, so you can start growing, and so you can start guiding other people based off of the things that you learned about yourself. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're supposed to do: spread the knowledge that we know and learn to people around us, to people throughout the world. So yes, thank you so much for tuning back in. It has been a while, guys. Yes, I know. I am so sorry. I apologize. But long story short, in a nutshell, life has been lifing, in a good way and kind of some in a bad. I don't want to say a bad way, but I'll say I've definitely had some challenging moments and some trying times. So yes, today this episode is going to be all about me talking about those things. I have so many things to share with you guys. Like, so many great things have been happening in my life. I know I talk about ups and downs a lot, and I have been experiencing up and downs still, of course. Don't we all? But I realized, like, the downs I experienced, they're downs just for that moment. And every time, you know, something great happens out of those down moments. So it's always a learning lesson in everything that we go through, where it's not the most pleasant experience that we have to deal with. So yes, I came to talk with you guys about that, just the stuff going on in my life. Major shifts, major moves, like a lot of major stuff going on in my life, for real. But I do want to, I guess, title this somewhere in the nature of, I guess you would say I've been dealing with some spiritual warfare. You know, I've really been, you know, growing a closer relationship with God and just getting connected with just different people in a more spiritual way, I guess you would say, and just really living my life out in that manner. So, you know, of course, there's some spiritual warfare that you may have to go through, and basically with the spiritual warfare, like, you know, with all good things may come some bad things, and that's kind of what I've been experiencing. And you know, when the devil can't get to you, and somebody said this to me when I was going through like a really tough moment, like in my life recently. Somebody said this to me, and I was like, you right, you absolutely right. But basically, like, when the devil can't get to you, they're going to try to get to other people around you. So long story short, the devil was trying to get to my daughter. So for those of you who don't know, I think I've told you guys that I have a daughter like some videos ago, but for those of you who don't know, I have a 2-year-old daughter. And on Christmas Day, we ended up in the ICU. Started out emergency room, then ended up in the ICU. We actually had to get airlifted in a helicopter to an ICU. So I'm going to get into that story. I promised on Instagram that I was going to share the story, because I've been a little eerie about sharing it because it's such a touchy topic. But I know by me sharing it, it will help other moms, help other people, just to be more aware and pay attention to their children, and just to pay attention to just everything in general going on around them. So that is what this is all about, for me to bring awareness to the situation that my daughter went through and experienced. And basically, like, a condition that's kind of going around in children. It's pretty common in children, like, right now in this day and age. So that's what I wanted to bring awareness to. All right, so on Christmas Day, of course, it was Christmas. Everything was fine. Everything was literally perfect. Like, woke up, opened Christmas gifts at my house, took her over to my mom's house so she can open up her gifts there, play with her cousins and everything. Then we came back to my house so we could get ready and go to another family member's house that evening. So as we're there, my daughter, she took a nap. She took a nap for about 2 hours, literally completely normal. I brought my niece over with me as well after I left my mom's house. So, because my niece, they're like besties. So my daughter took a nap for 2 hours, woke up, played with her cousin for a little bit, ate some food, you know, before we were about to leave. Just fine, literally a normal day. So I have this wagon. I put them in the wagon so I could just kind of wheel them out into the garage and then put them into the car. and put them in the car. Everything was good. So my daughter ended up falling asleep in the back of the car. She's in her car seat, strapped into her car seat, fell asleep in the back of the car, you know, like pretty much all children do. Like within 10 minutes, you know, they're asleep in the car. But I'm just like, I didn't think my daughter was gonna go to sleep because she literally had just finished sleeping for 2 hours, but it was dark outside. So I'm like, you know, maybe she got a little drowsy because of that. So she ended up falling asleep. So maybe within like 10 minutes of her sleeping, I started, like, the way she sounded, like basically like her snore, and she doesn't always snore, but she snores sometimes if she's really tired. Again, she shouldn't be that tired because she just took a 2-hour nap. She's making like this really weird like snoring noise, but it doesn't even sound snoring because it was to the point where it grabbed my attention. And my sister, she was riding with me. She was sitting in the front. And I look back at my daughter first, and I asked my niece, I'm like, is that Denver snoring? And she's like, yeah, she's snoring, she's asleep. But to me, it didn't sound like a snore. It was like a really weird noise that I never heard her like ever sound like in her life. Like in the 2 years of her living, I've never heard her sound like that. Like it was just so odd to me. It was almost like a long-winded pull, like almost a really long gasp, like trying to breathe, like a gasp of air, and then kind of just would release. It was like a really weird noise, like really weird, to the point where I had to, like, I kept looking back. So I was staying in Atlanta, so I'm in the city. We had to drive out to Covington. That's like a 40-minute drive. So literally, like, for half of the drive, like 20 minutes of the drive, I'm constantly looking back. You know, I'm on the expressway. I keep looking back because I'm like, why does she sound like that? Like, it was very alarming to me. And of course, you know, it's my child, so I know that that's not how she sounds. I'm like, that's weird. But to anybody else, they'll just think this is a child sleeping. But I know my child does not sound like this, so that already was alarming to me. But I'm like, okay, I don't want to be tripping out too bad, like, you know. So I got to the point where I ended up getting off on the exit, and I pulled over because I was just that concerned. I pulled her out of her car seat because I'm like, well, maybe it's a possibility. Maybe she's not getting air to her lungs like she needs to. You know how kids can be all crunched up in her seat. But she was sitting up fine, but I'm like, still, let me just pull her out. So pull her out of the car seat and let her sit up front with my sister until we got over to their house. And even when she's sitting in my sister's lap, I'm telling my sister, like, sit her up straight, because she still sounded the same. But she was still like kind of sitting up straight, but she still sounded that way, which was very weird to me. So we ended up arriving to my family's house or whatever. So my mom was there. I passed her off to my mom because they wanted to go lay her down. So I ended up going into the kitchen, making some food or whatever, because I'm like, maybe she just tired again. I'm like, I don't want to be freaking out too bad because I didn't think that nothing was wrong. I just thought that her sounding that way was a little different. But that was it. It wasn't like anything else that I noticed that was happening to her. So made me some food or whatever, sitting down at the kitchen, like talking or whatever to everybody there. And like within 15 minutes of us there, like my aunt came to the front and she came and got me. Just wanted to ask me about Denver, my daughter. So she was like, does she always sound like that when she sleeps? So when she said that, mind you, this is one of my aunts that she had never met my daughter. This was her first time meeting my daughter. So this was her first time seeing her. So it's like she never saw her, she never heard her sleeping, been around her while she sleep or nothing. So for her to come and get me, because the way that my daughter like sounded while she was sleeping grabbed her attention. When she said, does she always sound like that when she sleeps? I said, okay, now I know I'm not tripping, and now I know something is wrong. Because if somebody else that don't even know my child comes up to me and say that, okay, it's a problem. Like, I need to figure out what's going on. So of course I go try to wake up my daughter. She was like not responding like at all to, and I done told this story a million times, and I think I cried enough. So I'm really gonna try not to, you know, cry on camera, but if it come out, then whatever, because it's my child. But yeah, like went to try to wake her up. She was unresponsive. She was still breathing, of course, but again, the breathing was very weird, like a faint type of breath, kind of like almost, I don't know, like trying to pull air, as much air she can to her lungs, like almost like struggling trying to breathe, but it didn't seem like a struggle. I can't really explain it. But went to try to wake her up. She was like not responding to touch, not responding to my voice. We're trying to like, move her body, and she's literally like not responsive, like at all. She's literally still breathing, but it's almost like she was very lethargic, body super limp. If you could lift up her hand and it would just fall back down. Like normally, even when I passed her to my mom, I noticed it was something different. Normally when she sleep, if you pass her off to somebody, she'll like kind of reach over to the person, but she didn't do that, So it was just so, at that point when she wasn't like responding or moving or anything like that, like responding to nothing, I just started to like freak out. Like I really panicked, because I'm like, what is like, I don't understand what was happening. Like, why was she not responding? And of course, at this point, we had called 911. Somebody called 911. And even when I tried to like open up her eyes, like her eyes would like roll into the back of her head. Like it was a very, very scary, very traumatic thing to experience. I said I wasn't gonna cry. I'm gonna get a little emotional, but I just wanted to make this video to really bring awareness to it, because it's something you don't want your child to go through, So I want to bring awareness to it, because a lot of people probably would have never paid attention to it, So I want people to know, like, just different signs to look out for. So yeah, not responsive or anything like that. So the emergency, the people from the ambulance, the EMT ended up coming. They were doing the same thing, trying to make her wake up. She wasn't responding either to their voice, to like touch, like literally nothing. And at this point, like I'm freaking out. I'm freaking out. I'm really like panicking. And of course, when you're in a moment like that, the first thing that goes through your mind are like bad thoughts. Like bad thoughts. I'm not gonna lie, like it was bad thoughts going through my mind, because I'm like, I never been in a situation like this. I never been through a situation like this myself at all, like what happening with me, let alone anybody else around me. And it was just very scary for me. So I didn't know what to expect. So of course the first thoughts coming to my mind are bad. So at this point, they rushed my child out of the house and take her into the ambulance. So I'm right after them. But one thing that really helped me, and to this day I'm super thankful for it, because this is what really helped me to shift like the way I was thinking in that moment. Because like I said, like they weren't the best thoughts. So one of my aunts, she has been watching me on my YouTube and watching my posts, like my posts from my Instagram, go to my Facebook, and she had been watching me post my videos as far as like the journey that I've been on now. And she sees like the way that I speak about just everything now, and how I feel about just the world and just God and everything. And I think that this was God kind of speaking through her to me in this moment, because even while my child was going through that, like waiting on the ambulance, I'm just speaking out loud to God, like, God, please, wake my baby up. Please wake my child up, But still, even with me saying that out loud, I still had bad thoughts, which is not good. So my aunt, before I walked out of the room, she stopped me and she gave me a hug. And as she's hugging me, she's like, she basically said, like, you know what to do. God has prepared you for this. And when she said that, it was almost like something went off in my mind, like in my brain, like, you right, like God has prepared me for this, like for this exact moment. Like God has prepared me for this. The way that my mind has been shifting over all these months, like I have been prepared for this, and it's no way that I can literally let everything that I learned after all this time go down the drain when I need it the most. And that was basically by me having faith and me thinking positive thoughts. So in that moment, I knew I had to change the way that I was thinking. So before I stepped out of that door, literally anything that I thought, it was just positive. You know, I let go of the negativity, and I switched it with more positive thoughts. You know, it's almost like you can't sit there and pray to God saying you want him to fix this and want him to do that for you. And you thinking the worst, in that moment. Like, of course, the worst may happen because that's what you're thinking. And I've learned and I've realized too, like, your thoughts are just as powerful as your words. So even though you might not be saying it out loud, whatever you're thinking, that's what comes into action. That's what comes to life. That's what comes to fruition. Like, the things that you are thinking, you know, that's what's gonna push through. So I was like, you know what? I have to change the way that I'm thinking. I have to. So in that moment, that's when I did that. So after that, you know, we're in the ambulance. They're trying to, you know, they put in the IV into her or whatever, and they couldn't find a good vein. Y'all, they had to put an IV in through her neck. I was just like, I just was really in shock by the whole moment. I never rode in no ambulance truck before, you know, not with nobody else, not with myself. And I never would imagine it would have been for my child, you know. So it was a very tough moment. But I know I had to stay strong, because it's just like, if I'm a mess, I can't be there for my child when she need me the most. Just trying not to cry on here. But I know I had to be strong for my child, especially in a moment she couldn't do nothing. So so we get to the hospital over there, but we in the emergency room. And at this point, it's like about 15 doctors in the room, like trying to work on her, trying to figure out what's wrong. And you know how you watching TV and it's like a hospital show or whatever, emergency show, and they have them in this room, and then at the top of the room there's this big timer. Like, we were in a room that had this big timer in there, and I knew what the timer was for. It's basically like what they use to call the time of death for people, or probably the time of birth, you know. But you know, I looked at that and I didn't let that like take me out, because really it's just like seeing just all that stuff and just everything in that moment was just very like unbelievable to me. And looking at that timer really like kind of had me shook, but I was like, okay, still thinking positive thoughts, thoughts even in the worst moment. So, you know, at this point they tell me like, okay, we're gonna have to fly y'all to Children's, like you have to get airlifted to Children's Hospital. And you know, I don't really care what's going on. I just want my baby to wake up. Like, that's all I was focused on, was my baby opening her eyes. Like, she was breathing and everything, and that made me feel a lot better, but I really just wanted her to wake up, because she was just in this state where she just was unresponsive. It was very weird. Like, even to pain, like, she was not waking up to nothing. Like, she didn't budge one bit, like, to that IV getting placed in her neck or nothing. And you know, they ended up giving her fluids and all that stuff. Like, she hooked up to all these machines or whatever. They ended up having to intubate her, putting a tube down her throat. She had a feeding tube in her nose. And before we this is crazy. That's why I didn't really want to tell it, because I just didn't want my emotions to show on camera, because I don't like crying on camera. But you know, this is a very vulnerable moment, and I am an advocate for vulnerability, because it shows the realness of what happens and what goes on in this world, because this is a real life moment, you know, and people need to know and understand, like, pay attention to your kids. But yeah, so before we got lifted to the hospital, so her dad was there at this point, and it's just the worst thing. You don't want to see like your child like in a predicament like that, with her in a hospital bed, all these doctors trying to work on her. It's nothing that you can do but sit there and watch. And just seeing all this stuff connected to her, it was just she was 1 at the time. She just turned 2 last week. But just seeing your 1-year-old like that, it's not a sight you want to see. It's not a sight you envision, like, for yourself, for your life, for your child's life, or nothing. But so they ended up taking her they wheeled her out to get an x-ray. They wanted to do an x-ray before we got airlifted to the hospital. So when they were wheeling her in to do an x-ray, they told her dad and I that we couldn't go into the room, of course, because it's for the x-ray. But right before they were about to shut the door, her eyes popped open. And in that moment, I was like, I felt so much relief, like, so much relief. Like, that's all I wanted was her to wake up. And she woke up, and I was so happy. But of course, you know, still a lot of things had to be done. So after the x-ray, they told us that they ended up sedating her, giving her a little bit of sedation so she could be calm during the x-ray so she wouldn't panic or nothing. So of course she's back asleep now, but I still was excited that she woke up in that moment. And now I know that she's kind of out is because of, like, the medication that she's on. So we get to and I'm kind of happy too, because she probably would have been panicking in the helicopter like that. Mind y'all, Christmas Day in Atlanta was very cold outside, very cold. So I have on my Christmas outfit, y'all. I got on these heels, you know, like, I'm dressed up, makeup on, and I'm just like, of course it's something that you weren't expecting, but I wasn't even thinking about none of that stuff. Like, y'all, by the end of the night, my feet was hurting so bad, but I didn't even realize it in the moment because I was literally just focused on my child. So we ended up getting airlifted to Children's Hospital in the city, and that took like 15 minutes. And what happened? So of course we went into the hospital again. There's like 10 doctors in there just trying to figure out what's going on. So of course, like, over 20 times, different nurses and doctors asking me, you know, what happened, blah, 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 blah. Even though they probably had just heard me say it to the next person. You know, almost like a thing where, and I get it too, you know, because there are certain situations and circumstances where parents are the reason a child may be in that predicament, or just maybe an accident may happen. But I think in some situations, some parents do certain things to kids that normal people wouldn't think would happen. And I think that's why they just have to ask those questions, just as security reasons. Because even, like, I have a friend, and she had went through something with the hospitals, and they were asking her stuff, basically almost accusing of why her child was in the hospital or whatever. So basically it was kind of a similar situation, but they even did like a urine test on my child because they thought she could have potentially got into like some medicines or in something like that. And literally she couldn't have gotten into anything because my whole entire house is childproof, like, from the plugs into the wall, from cabinets having child locks on them, the doors having child locks. Literally everything is like childproof. Like, she can't get into anything. So I'm like, there's no way possible she could have gotten into anything and put anything into her mouth. Like, she does like to put things in her mouth, but if she does put anything in her mouth, it's her toys, you know. So there was nothing that her test came back negative, like nothing was showing up in her urine. They were just so confused as to why she was the way that she was, you know. Long story short, we were in the ICU. We were in the ICU for about 2 days. During this time, my child is a fighter. Let's say that. My child is a fighter. And one thing I made sure I kept doing, again, when your child is in a situation or state like that, even then, if they're not, you have to be an advocate for your child. You have to be there for your child and let your child know that you are there for them, even in times where they can't physically see. But speak to your child, speak life into your child, because they're listening, they hear you, you know. Even if you think they don't hear you, even if they're not responding, speak life into your child. Like, that's probably just what your child needs, just so they can reach back to that light that they're trying to get to, for real. And that's what I made sure I did. Like, I don't care who was around. Like, I don't care what state she in right now. I don't care what situation this is. I'm going to speak life into my child, because she's going to get up. Like, she's going to get up. And I kept telling, like, everybody around me, she's going to get up. I'm not worried. She's going to get up. So I'm talking to her. I'm saying her name, letting her know that I'm right here. I'm holding her hand, rubbing her hand, you know, making sure she's good. Like, pay attention. Even in that moment, I'm paying attention to her, because, oh my God, like, it's a long story, but I'll just get back into the ICU part. When we first got there, you know, they went through all that stuff, asked us these questions. So we're in the ICU for 2 days. During that time, I said she's a fighter, because during that time, even with her on sedation, because they wanted her to be calm and comfortable, because she had that tube down her throat, and they didn't want her to wake up and try to take the tube out. When I tell you, my child, it got to the point where I would say her name and she would kind of like blink her eyes, or she would open her eyes and close them. Mind y'all, she's very drowsy because of the sedation. Wake up, she'll respond to like touches now, you know, squeezing our fingers and stuff like that. She'll kick her legs. And it was funny, because they were basically saying like, all right, we want to lower the sedation now so we can possibly take the tube out, because we want to see how she does with breathing on her own. I knew she was going to be okay breathing on her own, just based off of how she was responding with the sedation in her. So they would lower the sedation. Of course, you lower the sedation, I'm not as drugged up no more. So my child was like waking up, like trying to get up. She'll try to come to me and stuff like that. So then they'll put more increase the sedation. So I'm like, you know, at this point, I'm like, okay, y'all gonna have to take this tube out, because my child is ready to get up. Like, that's what I told them. Y'all have to take this tube out, because my child is ready to get up. Like, I could see it. Like, I felt everything. And they were actually a day late with taking it out, because they couldn't get around to it. But it was moments in there where I was just not playing, like, you know, not being rude or nothing like that. But somebody has to be an advocate in that situation. And if you don't, they're going to do you how they want to do you. And nothing against hospitals, because definitely their number one main priority is the care of the patient, for sure. But I find it a lot, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I find it a lot better when somebody has someone else in the room with them, being an advocate for them, when they can't do that for themselves, because they notice a lot of things more, because they're with the patient more than the nurse or the doctor is. And I was with my child 24/7. So yeah, it was even things like she had IVs in her both her arms, and then one in her neck, and then it had put one in her ankle, like IVs all over the place. It got to the point where 2 of the IVs got bad, and they didn't notice it. Mind y'all, I'm paying attention to my child. I'm watching her like a hawk. Literally every little thing, I'm checking her. Even the way they wiped her, I'm like, can you wipe her a little bit better? Or sometimes I would take over and do it, you know, like, because, yeah. Anyway, so had IVs in both her arms. I went to grab her hand, and I noticed her hand was puffy. Like, her hand was not the same. So I brought notice and attention to the nurse that was watching over her in that moment. The nurse didn't notice it, again, because I'm in the room with her more than the nurse is. And even when the nurse is, it's like they're checking for the things that they're supposed to check for. They're not looking at little things like legs and hands and just little stuff like that. They may notice it over a while, like after a while, over time. But when things were happening, I was noticing them then, because again, I know my child and I'm paying attention. And I noticed her hand was really puffy. So of course, this is not normal. So I bring it to her attention. My child's hand is puffy, blah, 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 blah. IV went bad. They had to take it out. Other one did the same thing. I brought notice to it. They had to take it out. So I just wanted to say that it's just like, pay attention. Like, even when you're in the hospital and you have people that are there to care for your children, still be that extra pair of eyes, because you know your child or whoever better than that person does. They know that what they're going to internally and physically, probably just based off of like medicine and science. But just overall, you know, ideally how that person is, how they function every single day physically their appearance and just how they are overall. So pay attention. So just to kind of cut the story short, after they took her off took the tubes out of her, you know, she was still a little drowsy, back to herself. But once of course, they wanted to make sure everything was okay with her, if she was responding properly, was she still talking right, was she still walking, everything like that. And everything was like back to normal, thank God. Definitely thanking God for that, for sure, because you know, that's something that you want to worry about too, because you just never know. But they were wondering if she had a seizure or something like that. They weren't able to confirm that she had a seizure. She looks pretty fine to me. The state that she was in kind of reminded me of how people are when they have a seizure, like the aftermath of it. But I didn't physically see her have a seizure. And I know it doesn't necessarily mean like shaking of the body, but there were no signs that showed me that she had a seizure. And I used to work with people that had seizures, so I'm pretty much like, I'm pretty much aware when someone has one, even like the seizures where they don't shake. But yeah, they did an EKG, they did an EEG, they did an echocardiogram, and everything came back normal. I will say over the past maybe 2 months, my baby has been having chronic ear infections. And I'm, you know, told them that, of course, asking them, do they think that could be a part of the issue? And they're like, you know, it could be. So they ended up diagnosing her with RSV, which is a respiratory infection, which is very, very common in children these days. Very common, you know, even at her school. They send us messages all the time when there's confirmed cases of COVID, RSV, hand, foot, and mouth, like stuff like that. We get notifications of that. So I wasn't like surprised, you know, because it's such a common infection. And there's no, as far as like medicine to help cure it, it just kind of it goes away. So they confirmed her with that, but they still are unsure as to why she became unresponsive. That's why they brought up seizures, because they didn't see a case of RSV like that before. So I was just wondering, like, you know, maybe the ear infections had something to do with it, but even at that point, her ear infection had cleared up. So it's just a very tricky type of situation. I left the hospital really not with any solid answers as to why, just to keep paying attention to your child, which I will do and always do. But yes, I just wanted to really make this video because, again, the spiritual warfare is real. The devil, no, he can't get to me, so he tried to come for my child, but little do you know, he can't get to my child either, you know? So definitely stay prayed up, stay aware of what's going on around you, within yourself, within your kids, within your family. Pay attention to your people. And yes, just be mindful of everything, you know? And when you know something is wrong, don't doubt yourself. Act on it in that moment. And I'm so happy that, I don't know, I'm happy that the situation played out the way that it did, because I could have been in a different place at a different time, or it could have happened overnight while we were asleep, you know, and ain't no telling what would have happened. And it's crazy because I normally go over someone else's house for Christmas, and I decided to go over my family's house this year. So I just think everything kind of happens for a reason in that moment. But I'm thankful. I'm thankful that, you know, we were out of the hospital within 3 days, and my child is back to normal. She's fine, running around, happy-go-lucky. She was able to enjoy her second birthday that following week. So yes, everything has been going well. So thank you so much again for tuning in to Becoming Brittany J. Stay tuned for my next video, because I told y'all in the beginning of this video, there has been a lot of major things, changes, and moves happening in my life. And I don't know if y'all noticed, but this is a different background of where I normally sit. I just moved, y'all, this past Saturday, and I moved to another state. So stay tuned for the next video on that, because I'll tell y'all exactly when I moved. I'll tell y'all, well, I'll tell you Saturday. So I'll tell y'all where I moved exactly. And, you know, just about why I moved and everything like that. And I'm excited to share it with y'all because this has definitely been a journey, and the manifestation is real, okay? The manifestation is real. I ain't gonna say too much, but when I tell y'all the importance of journaling and writing stuff down and putting dates on it, I can't wait to share this with y'all because this is something I manifested from 2018 and we in 2023 right now. So thanks again for joining. I hope to see y'all next week, and make sure you follow me on Instagram at becomingbrittanyj. But until then, peace.